It was October 7th, 2016, and in Boulder, Colorado, a marketing coordinator was heading out for her usual morning run, completely unaware of the deadly predator lurking nearby. As I pore over the old case files, I'm always struck by how quickly a seemingly ordinary day can turn into a nightmare. I have spent countless hours reviewing the details of that particular incident, which occurred in the affluent Wildwood Heights neighborhood. This upscale residential area, built just 5 years earlier on the edge of the Rocky Mountain foothills, was still wrapped in the quiet darkness of early morning. The winding streets were lined with modern homes that backed up against natural open space, creating wildlife corridors. Lisa Hartwell, a 33-year-old marketing coordinator for a local tech company, was beginning her daily 5 a.m. jogging routine through the carefully planned streets and cul-de-sacs. Lisa had moved to Wildwood Heights 2 years earlier, drawn by the community's promise of mountain living with urban conveniences. She was a dedicated fitness enthusiast who maintained a strict exercise schedule, often rising before dawn to complete her 5-mile run before heading to the office. Lisa's morning routine had become sacred to her, a peaceful time when she could clear her mind while enjoying the crisp mountain air and stunning views. That autumn, the neighborhood had been experiencing an unusually dry spell, with drought conditions persisting well into what should have been the wet season. Local wildlife officials had issued warnings about increased animal activity in residential areas, as deer, elk, and their predators were being forced to venture closer to human settlements in search of water sources. Several residents had reported mountain lion sightings over the past month, including tracks found in backyards and a large cat spotted near the community's retention pond. Lisa had heard about the wildlife warnings but dismissed them, considering them typical concerns for Colorado mountain living. She continued her early morning runs without altering her route or carrying any deterrent, confident that her familiar neighborhood streets were safe. I have learned that mountain lions, also known as cougars or pumas, are North America's second largest wildcat species. Adult males can weigh between 115 and 220 pounds. These powerful predators are perfectly adapted for hunting in mountainous terrain, possessing incredible stealth, speed, and jumping ability that allows them to leap vertically up to 15 feet and horizontally up to 45 feet. Mountain lions are primarily ambush hunters that rely on surprise attacks, typically targeting the neck and spine of their prey to deliver quick, fatal bites. As Lisa jogged through the pre-dawn darkness, she was completely unaware that a 140-pound male mountain lion had been stalking a mule deer through the drainage culvert that ran beneath the street she was approaching. Lisa's approach disrupted the carefully planned hunt, startling both the deer and the mountain lion. The deer bolted across the street and disappeared into the darkness, leaving the frustrated predator crouched in the shadows of the concrete drainage opening. The attack came without warning as Lisa passed within 10 feet of the drainage culvert. The 140-pound mountain lion exploded from the shadows with incredible speed, covering the distance between them in a single powerful leap. His massive front paws struck Lisa between the shoulder blades with devastating force, sending her crashing face first onto the asphalt street, while his weight drove her to the ground. Lisa's attempts to scream were cut short as the mountain lion's powerful jaws clamped down on the back of her neck, his 4-inch canine teeth puncturing through muscle and vertebrae with crushing force. The mountain lion's razor-sharp claws raked across Lisa's back and shoulders, each swipe opening deep gashes that severed major blood vessels and caused massive tissue damage. The 140-pound cat used his incredible strength to pull Lisa's body across the asphalt and down into the concrete culvert, where the darkness and confined space would provide protection while he fed. Lisa's body was recovered 3 hours later by a joint team of police officers and Colorado Parks and Wildlife personnel. The mountain lion had abandoned his kill when the search teams approached, retreating further into the drainage network that connected to the natural creek system beyond the neighborhood. Lisa had died from massive trauma to her neck and spine, with the mountain lion's killing bite proving instantly fatal. The investigation revealed that Lisa had been jogging along her usual route when she inadvertently interrupted the mountain lion's hunt, triggering the attack that cost her life. The mountain lion was tracked and euthanized the following day, after being located in the foothills above the neighborhood. The files then jumped to another incident, August 19, 2017. Felicity Grant arrived at Boulder County Open Space in Colorado, a vast wilderness area known for its rugged terrain and diverse wildlife population. The mountainous region stretched across thousands of acres of dense forest and winding trails that attracted outdoor enthusiasts. However, these same wilderness areas also served as prime habitat for mountain lions and other dangerous predators. Felicity Grant, a 39-year-old fitness influencer from Denver with over 5,000 social media followers, had planned what she called her ultimate wilderness transformation experience. Known for her entitled attitude and belief that her athletic superiority made her exempt from rules, she had already caused multiple confrontations at the park entrance. Her demanding personality became evident when she berated the teenage park attendant for suggesting she read safety guidelines, claiming someone of her fitness level didn't need advice from minimum wage employees. Park Ranger Tom Bradley had attempted to brief Felicity on recent mountain lion activity during her permit application process. The area had experienced multiple cougar sightings over the previous month, including aggressive encounters that resulted in temporary trail close. Felicity became increasingly hostile, interrupting Tom repeatedly. "I've seen the reports, the photographs, the aftermath. It always stays with me. Mountain lions are among North America's most efficient apex predators, perfectly adapted for hunting in mountainous terrain. Adult males can weigh up to 180 lb and measure over 8 ft in length, with powerful hind legs capable of propelling them up to 40 feet in a single leap." I remember reading about Felicity, the influencer who chose the Rabbit Ears Pass Trail for her solo dawn run, deliberately ignoring the trail close signs. She claimed they didn't apply to elite athletes like herself. There were warnings. A fellow hiker tried to caution her about hiking alone during dawn. Felicity dismissed her cruelly, implying jealousy. She'd even torn down warning notices, asserting her right to use public trails. She began her run at 5:30 a.m., wanting to avoid other hikers. She wore noise-cancelling headphones, playing loud electronic music, and carried a backpack with raw steaks for a post-workout meal. The combination of erratic movement, heavy breathing, and the scent of fresh meat created perfect conditions to attract a hunting mountain lion. A 140 lb male mountain lion, already hunting in the area, detected the scent of fresh meat from over a mile away. It began tracking her. The cougar stalked Felicity along the ridge, using rocks and trees for cover. As Felicity rounded a bend, the mountain lion positioned itself on a large boulder about 15 feet above the path. When Felicity passed below, completely unaware, the mountain lion launched its attack. The predator struck from behind with tremendous force. Its hind claws raked down her back, while its front paws wrapped around her shoulders and neck. The mountain lion's canine teeth clamped down on the back of Felicity's neck. The attack was executed with deadly efficiency. The cougar's jaws applied crushing press, severing the connection between her brain and body instantly. The bite fractured the vertebrae, causing immediate paralysis. The cougar maintained its grip, claws digging in. Within minutes, Felicity died from a combination of spinal cord severance, blood loss, and suffocation. The mountain lion dragged her body off the trail to feed. Her remains were discovered 3 days later. The fluorescent lights of the county animal shelter always seemed so harsh. I remember reading about Jennifer Walsh, a 25-year-old veterinary student volunteering there. She believed every animal deserved a second chance. She gravitated toward the most difficult cases, the animals marked with red cards scheduled for immediate euthanization. The dog that would cost Jennifer her life was Diesel, a 75 lb pit bull with a scarred muzzle. He'd been surrendered after multiple bite incidents, including an attack on a neighbor's child. The behavioral assessment was clear: too dangerous for adoption. Jennifer had been watching Diesel for days, looking for signs of a gentle soul beneath the aggression. She'd seen him pace restlessly, growl at anyone who approached, destroy every toy in his cage. But she'd also noticed moments of what she interpreted as vulnerability. The shelter's protocol was clear. Dogs like Diesel were never to be handled alone. But Jennifer convinced herself that his aggression was fear-based, that he needed one-on-one attention. On that December afternoon, with most staff busy, Jennifer approached Diesel. I keep thinking about Jennifer, the young woman who dreamed of being a veterinarian. Her story is a stark reminder that good intentions aren't always enough. On that day, she went into Diesel's kennel with a slip lead and the key to the isolation room. It was a small, windowless space meant for behavioral evaluations. Diesel's reaction was immediate. His lips pulled back, revealing his teeth. His hackles rose, and a low growl rumbled from his chest. Every part of him screamed danger, but Jennifer thought it was fear. When she opened the kennel door, Diesel seemed to shift, calculating. He seemed to be assessing her position, and this gave Jennifer the confidence to slip the lead around his neck and guide him to the isolation room. Once inside, she closed the door and removed the lid, thinking it would help him relax. The room was small, just 8 by 10 feet, with concrete walls and nothing but a metal folding chair. It was designed for safety, but there was nowhere to run. For minutes, Diesel stood rigid, his eyes fixed on Jennifer. She sat in the chair and began talking to him, her voice gentle, unaware that she was being evaluated by a predator. The attack came when Jennifer stood and stepped toward him, her hand extended in what she thought was a peaceful gesture. But to Diesel, it was a threat. His 75 pounds launched across the room, his jaws targeting Jennifer's throat with terrible precision. Her scream was cut short as Diesel's teeth sank into her neck, crushing her windpipe and severing major blood vessels. His jaws locked and he shook violently, tearing through tissue and bone. Blood sprayed across the concrete walls as Jennifer struggled, her body going into shock. The attack was swift and brutal. Jessica Rodriguez, a 31-year-old veterinary technician from Tampa, visited the facility with her husband Carlos, believing it was a legitimate conservation effort. Jessica had always been passionate about animal welfare. She'd dedicated her career to it, earning her veterinary technology degree through years of hard work. Her passion for primate conservation had led her to volunteer at legitimate sanctuaries and support organizations working to protect great apes in the wild. She genuinely believed that her visit to Sunshine Primate Sanctuary would help promote conservation. That afternoon, Jessica was participating in what the facility called an educational encounter with King, a 350-pound silverback gorilla who'd been acquired from a defunct research facility. The sanctuary's minimal safety maze consisted of a chain-link barrier separating visitors from the gorilla's enclosure, with no additional protection or supervision. Silverback gorillas are incredibly powerful. Adult males can weigh up to 400 pounds and possess the strength of 10 grown men. They are intelligent and emotionally complex, but they're also territorial and can become extremely aggressive when they perceive threats. I've often found that the most tragic encounters stem from a fundamental misunderstanding. We see calm, and we interpret friendliness. But sometimes that stillness is merely the calculated patience of a territorial animal assessing potential threats. I remember reading the story of Jessica, who approached a gorilla enclosure with a camera. She hoped to capture images that would convey the animal's intelligence and emotional depth. The gorilla, named King, appeared calm, sitting near the fence, seemingly relaxed as he observed the human visitors with curiosity. Jessica began photographing him, excited about the conservation message she could share through these portraits. The fatal moment came when Jessica decided to reach through the fence to touch King. She believed physical contact would create a more powerful image for her conservation advocacy. King's reaction was instantaneous and devastating. The moment Jessica's hand passed through the barrier, the 350-pound silverback grabbed her arm with crushing strength and pulled her against the chain-link fencing. Jessica's scream filled the facility as King's grip tightened. Other visitors tried desperately to free her, but the gorilla's strength was far beyond human capability. He grabbed her head and shoulders, pulling her harder against the inadequate fencing. His territorial instincts drove him to continue the assault, his powerful hands inflicting devastating trauma to Jessica's head, neck, and arms. Jessica's attempts to break free only seemed to increase King's aggressive behavior as he interpreted her struggles as continued threats. Her movements grew weaker as massive blood loss and crushing injuries overwhelmed her body. King's grip never loosened. Within minutes, Jessica's struggle ceased. The massive gorilla maintained his grip on her lifeless form while displaying threatening behavior toward anyone who approached the enclosure. Emergency responders arrived, but Jessica was already dead. The investigation revealed that the Sunshine Primate Sanctuary had been operating as an illegal roadside zoo, exploiting both animals and visitors. The facility was immediately shut down, and King was transferred to an accredited facility. Jessica's death prompted enhanced regulations for animal sanctuaries and stricter enforcement of wildlife protection laws. Her family established a foundation supporting legitimate primate conservation efforts. Then there's the story of Maria Santos. It was March 18, 2017, in an upscale neighborhood in Asheville, North Carolina. Maria, a 41-year-old single mother and part-time dog walker, was making her evening rounds. She had been working as a professional dog walker for 3 years, building a loyal clientele among the affluent homeowners. Maria's income helped support her teenage daughter. The neighborhood had been carved out of pristine mountain forest, and recent construction had disrupted established animal movement patterns. The Wildlife Resources Commission had issued warnings about increased bear activity. On this particular evening, she was walking 3 large dogs when she noticed unusual activity near a row of garbage cans. Black bears are North America's most common bear species, with adult females typically weighing between 200 and 400 pounds. And mother bears with cubs are extremely protective. I've seen the aftermath of bear attacks, and what haunts me is how quickly they happen. Bears have an excellent sense of smell, and they're drawn to where people live by garbage, pet food, anything that smells like an easy meal. When surprised, they can run up to 35 miles per hour. They are strong enough to break down doors, overturn cars, and their claws and teeth, well, they can cause devastating injuries, especially if you threaten their cubs or territory. I remember reading about Maria, who approached an intersection one morning where garbage cans had been placed for pickup. She found a 300-pound female black bear with 2 small cubs rummaging through the containers. The mother bear had torn open several bags and was feeding, while her cubs played nearby. Maria knew the danger immediately and began backing away slowly. But the 3 dogs she was walking became agitated and started barking aggressively at the bears. That triggered the mother bear's protective instincts. She saw the barking dogs as a direct threat to her cubs. She rose to her full height, began making aggressive noises, and positioned herself between the dogs and her offspring. Maria tried to control the excited animals and retreat, but the dogs continued barking and lunging, only escalating the situation. The 300-pound mother bear charged toward Maria and the dogs with incredible speed, closing the 30 yards between them in just seconds. Maria tried to run while holding 3 leashes, but became entangled and fell hard onto the asphalt street. The dogs scattered, leaving Maria vulnerable as the enraged bear approached. The mother bear's massive paws struck Maria's back and shoulders with crushing force, driving her face into the pavement, her weight pinning Maria to the ground. The bear's powerful jaws clamped down on Maria's head and neck, her teeth puncturing through skull bone and severing vital arteries. Maria's attempts to protect herself were futile against an animal several times her size and weight. The bear's razor-sharp claws raked across Maria's torso and limbs, each swipe opening deep gashes that caused massive blood loss and tissue damage. The attack was methodical, brutal, driven by maternal instincts to eliminate any threat to her cubs. Maria's struggles grew weaker as trauma and blood loss overwhelmed her. Residents in nearby homes heard the commotion and called 911 while trying to scare the bear away with loud noises and bright lights. The mother bear eventually retreated with her cubs toward the forest, leaving Maria motionless on the street. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but couldn't save her. She had died from massive head and neck trauma. The investigation revealed that improperly secured garbage containers had attracted the mother bear and her cubs, creating the conditions for the fatal encounter. Wildlife officials determined that the bear had been acting defensively to protect her offspring and wasn't exhibiting abnormally aggressive behavior. The mother bear and cubs were relocated to a remote mountain area away from human populations. Maria's death prompted immediate changes to the waste management protocols, including the installation of bear-proof garbage containers and new guidelines for refuge. The community also implemented an early warning system for wildlife sightings and began requiring all residents to remove potential attractants from their properties. Then there's the story of Rebecca Martinez. It was October 15th, 2016, and the Georgia sun was setting over her 10-acre property, casting long shadows across a maze of makeshift kennels. The constant barking of 40 rescue dogs echoed across the land, a soundtrack to her life. At 34, Rebecca had spent 8 years building her unofficial sanctuary, taking in the dogs that other shelters wouldn't touch. The aggressive ones, the biters, the animals marked for immediate euthanasia. Her recent divorce had left her financially strained and emotionally isolated, with only her dogs for company on the remote property. Her neighbors had grown used to the noise, though some whispered concerns about the woman who seemed to care more about dangerous animals than her own safety. She rarely left the property anymore, moving between enclose with hands scarred from countless bites. Friends who still visited noticed the changes in Rebecca. She'd grown thinner, more withdrawn, speaking more about her dogs than anything else. Her ex-husband had tried to warn her about the dangers, but she dismissed his concerns. The local veterinarian had stopped making house calls after one of the dogs lunged at him through a fence gap, requiring stitches. Even the feed delivery drivers had begun leaving supplies at the gate rather than approaching the main compound. The main enclave housed her 3 largest rescues: Rex, a 90-pound pit bull mix with a history of severe abuse; Titan, an 85-pound Rottweiler cross; and Scar, a 75-pound mixed breed whose face told the story of his fighting past. What Rebecca didn't realize was that these 3 had been forming an alliance over the past few weeks, establishing a hierarchy that put them at odds with anyone who came between them and food. The warning signs had been there for anyone trained to recognize them. The three dogs had begun sleeping closer together, sharing food bowls, and displaying coordinated territorial behavior when other dogs approached. They'd started following Rebecca's movements more intently during feeding times, their body language shifting from grateful anticipation to something more predatory. But Rebecca, exhausted from managing 40 animals alone and emotionally invested in seeing progress. I've always found it chilling how a single moment can shatter years of habit and trust. Rebecca had fed those dogs thousands of times. Thousands. But on that evening, something shifted. The air itself felt different, charged with a tension she couldn't quite place. She was stepping into the enclosure, buckets of kibble in hand, when her boots slipped off the muddy ground. The spilling food became the catalyst. Rex, a dog she had rescued, a dog she had cared for, locked eyes with her. But this time, she wasn't his savior. She was competition. The attack was brutal, a frenzy of teeth and muscle. 90 pounds of Rex slammed into her chest, and then Titan and Scar joined in. Pack instincts overrode any sense of loyalty or gratitude. Her screams were lost in the vastness of the property. It lasted 10 minutes, they say. 10 minutes of unimaginable horror before the dogs backed away, leaving her broken and torn in the mud. 3 days passed before her body was found. Rex, Titan, and Scar were euthanized, along with a dozen others. Rebecca's death sparked debates, new regulations, but for those who knew her, it was too late. It always is. I remember reading about Camille, the jogger. It stayed with me for days. She unknowingly crossed into a wolf enclosure. The wolves had been fed the previous evening, but they were still alert after a cold night. From the observation tower, a zookeeper saw her and radioed for confirmation that the route was clear. Seconds later, he realized his mistake. She was inside the enclosure. He shouted into the radio, but before anyone could answer, the wolves moved. At first, they didn't charge. They emerged from the trees, low to the ground, tails stiff, heads aligned. Camille slowed, confused, thinking the barrier must be nearby. But then they began advancing in a slow arc, and she froze. She turned, saw the empty gravel behind her, and started jogging back. The wolves matched her pace, then accelerated. She broke into a sprint. The zookeeper watched as Camille glanced back once. Near a drainage trench, her foot caught on the uneven gravel, and she fell. Before she could get up, the lead wolf clamped down on her right thigh, pulling backward. She twisted, trying to kick free, but another wolf lunged at her shoulder. Her scream carried across the enclosure. The zookeeper sounded the alarm. The response vehicle was rerouted, delaying arrival to just under 10 minutes. 2 more wolves joined, surrounding her as she tried to crawl toward the ditch. The lead wolf released and re-gripped higher, its teeth sinking into her hip. She struck out with her hands, scraping the gravel, trying to push herself forward. But one of the animals bit into her arm, shaking until it tore free. Within moments, she was on her back, thrashing as the pack pulled from opposite sides. She kicked weakly once more, then went still. Rangers arrived within 10 minutes in a vehicle. They found the wolves clustered over Camille's body, heads low and jaws working. Warning shots sent the pack scattering into the trees. 2 rangers approached as another called for a tranquilizer team. Camille lay on her side, clothing torn, deep bites from shoulder to thigh. 1 ranger checked for a pulse and found none. They covered her with a thermal blanket and secured the area until all 5 wolves were sedated. An autopsy confirmed death by exsanguination, massive blood loss due to multiple deep lacerations, and crushing trauma to the limbs. The body was transported under escort. That afternoon, Camille's family filed a civil lawsuit against the Thorizu Safari and its parent company, alleging gross negligence and breach of safety protocol. After a year of investigation and hearings, the court ruled in favor of the family. The park quietly settled without appeal. Following the incident, a criminal negligence inquiry and an independent enclos audit were conducted. Thorizu Safari implemented procedural retrofits, installing interlocks and alarms that trigger if any gate remains unlatched for more than 15 seconds. It was July 22nd, 2016. The Oklahoma sun beat down on the dusty grounds of Wild Art Big Hat Sanctuary, a privately owned facility nestled among rolling hills outside Tulsa. The 50-acre property housed over 20 rescued lions, tigers, and other exotic cats in chain-link enclos. The afternoon air shimmered with heat, while the distant sound of roaring and pacing echoed from various habitats as the cats sought shade. Ashley Martinez, a 23-year-old college student from Dallas, had discovered the sanctuary through social media, while road tripping with her boyfriend Jake through Oklahoma's roadside attractions. Ashley was constantly seeking unique photo opportunities, having grown up taking pictures at every family vacation and special event. Her phone was filled with daredevil shots from cliff edges, abandoned buildings, and extreme sports activities. Ashley had grown up in suburban Dallas as the youngest of 3 sisters, developing a competitive streak that drove her to constantly push boundaries and seek attention through increasingly dramatic stunts. Her psychology major at Texas Tech University had given her confidence in reading people and situations, but her academic knowledge didn't extend to understanding animal behavior. That afternoon, Ashley and Jacob paid the sanctuary's fee for a close encounter experience that promised visitors the chance to observe big cats during feeding demonstrations and educational presentations. The facility operated in a legal grey area, offering interactions that legitimate zoos and accredited sanctuaries would never permit. African lions are apex predators that retain all their wild instincts regardless of human contact or hand-rearing. Adult males can weigh up to 420 lb and possess incredible strength, speed, and territorial behaviors that make them extremely dangerous in captivity. Lions are social animals with complex hierarchies, but they view humans as either threats to be eliminated or prey to be consumed. Their powerful jaws can deliver bite forces exceeding 650 lbs per square inch, while their razor-sharp claws can inflict fatal wounds with a swipe. I've always been fascinated by the way we perceive our place in the natural world, sometimes with tragic consequences. There's a story I came across that still haunts me, a stark reminder of the power of instinct. It involves a woman named Ashley, a lion named Caesar, and a decision made in the pursuit of a photograph. Ashley, it seems, was visiting a sanctuary. The owner was leading a tour, sharing what might be called dubious stories of animal rescues. The star was Caesar, a 400-pound African lion, seemingly docile, having been hand-raised since he was a cub. As the tour ended, Ashley saw a chance for a photo, the ultimate selfie. She asked Jake to distract the owner while she went for a closer shot with Caesar. Jake kept the owner busy, and Ashley quietly approached Caesar's enclos, climbing over a 4-foot chain-link fence. The massive lion was about 10 feet away, his golden eyes following her, but showing no obvious aggression. Ashley crouched, phone in hand, ready to capture the moment. But as she moved closer, something shifted. Caesar's ears flattened slightly, and his tail began to twitch. Then, with explosive speed, his predatory instincts took over. It was as if millions of years of evolutionary programming recognized Ashley as prey within his territory. The lion launched himself, covering the short distance in a single bound. Ashley's phone went flying as Caesar's paws struck her chest, sending her sprawling. Claws found purchase on her torso and shoulders. Then his jaws clamped down on her neck, 4-inch canine teeth piercing muscle and vertebrae. Caesar's territorial instincts drove the assault. Claws raked across Ashley's body as his bite held her throat. Her movements weakened as blood loss and spinal trauma overwhelmed her. Jake's screams brought the sanctuary owner running, but Caesar's aggressive posture made intervention too dangerous. Within minutes, Ashley was gone. Emergency responders arrived within half an hour, but it was too late. The investigation revealed the facility lacked proper permits and insurance, violating safety regulations. Caesar was relocated to an accredited sanctuary. Ashley's death devastated her family, and it prompted her university to improve safety educations for traveling students. The incident also led to stricter regulations for private exotic animal facilities and better enforcement of existing safety laws. Then there's the story of Giovanni Russo, which unfolded on May 21, 2018, in Gran Paradiso National Park, northern Italy. Giovanni, a certified alpine guide, had spent his life navigating those valleys, leading trekking tours with his wife, Eleanor. They specialized in remote routes, respecting the balance between humans and wildlife. One weekend, he led a pair of hikers from Milan on a routine trek. That night, someone left a pack of trail mix open near the fire pit, with dinner scraps tossed nearby. Wolves had returned to the region, and while normally nocturnal, rangers had noticed Boulder juveniles venturing closer to human camps, especially when food was accessible. Just before dawn, around 4 a.m., Eleanor woke to soft rustling near the cooking area, then a faint growl. Thinking it was a fox, she looked over and saw silhouettes clustered around the fire pit where the unsealed food bag now lay torn open. She whispered for Giovanni, who grabbed his flashlight and stepped outside alone, walking towards the food zone. The beam caught 3 wolves standing over scattered wrappers. He shouted and waved his light, but they didn't scatter. One stepped forward, hackles raised. Giovanni shouted again, clapping his hands as he closed the distance. The older female lunged, nipping at his forearm. Giovanni jerked back, but a younger one followed through, clamping down near his elbow. The bite struck deep, severing tissue. He fell backward, blood pulsing from his injuries. The wolves held their ground, circling the dropped food bag. Eleanor ran from the tent with a burning stick from the fire pit. I remember reading about the Lawson family's ill-fated trip to Sundarbans National Park. It's a place of stunning beauty, a vast mangrove delta where the Ganges meets the Bay of Bengal. But it's also home to some of the world's most dangerous creatures. I recall one detail in particular. Genevieve Lawson, apparently determined to have a premium experience, disregarded every safety warning issued by their guide. It's a tragic example of disrespect for nature and local wisdom. The motorboat they were on had safety barriers, meant to keep tourists safe from the apex predators of that ancient domain. But Genevieve viewed these precautions as obstacles, preventing her from capturing the perfect photographs. The Sundarbans are the exclusive hunting grounds for the world's largest population of Bengal tigers. These tigers are exceptional swimmers, adapted to hunting in this aquatic environment, and possess an unusual willingness to hunt humans in water. These magnificent cats can weigh up to 400 pounds and measure over 10 feet in length. Their 4-inch canine teeth are capable of crushing windpipes and delivering fatal wounds within seconds. During their afternoon tour, Ravi, their guide, spotted fresh tiger tracks along the muddy shoreline of a narrow channel. He cut the engine and whispered for silence, explaining that a large male tiger had recently passed through the area. Despite his warnings, Genevieve, frustrated by the distance, stepped over the safety barrier and lowered herself into the chest-deep channel water, camera held high. Unbeknownst to the group, a massive 400-pound male Bengal tiger had been resting in the dense vegetation upstream. The tiger slipped into the water, swimming silently toward Genevieve, with only its eyes and nose visible above the surface. The attack was swift and brutal. The tiger surfaced directly behind her, clamping its powerful jaws around her throat. Its 4-inch canine teeth punctured her neck, crushing her windpipe with over 1,000 pounds of bite force. The tiger's signature killing technique involved suffocating prey by crushing the throat, and the prez instantly collapsed her airway. There's a silence that comes with the forest, a muting of all usual sounds that can be more terrifying than any roar. On November 15, 2016, in the remote forests of Primorsky Krai, eastern Russia, snow fell in just such a veil, and Nikolai Baronov's radio had been silent since morning. Nikolai, you see, was 52, a forestry worker who'd spent most of his life in those woods. He managed patrols in the buffer zones near the Cody Allen Mountains, monitoring traps, logging boundaries, and poaching activity. He lived alone near Dalna, his life attuned to the forest's rhythms. That week, he was surveying a hunting reserve after reports of wolves pushing closer to villages. He'd ridden out before dawn on his snowmobile, a canvas bag packed with bread, tea, a hand axe, and flares. His colleagues said he preferred working alone, claiming a second engine just scared off wildlife. That day's assignment was simple: document animal tracks after the first full snow. Wolves had been increasingly active, driven from higher ground after a collapse in wild boar numbers. These wolves could travel up to 20 miles in a single night, driven by hunger across the frozen ground. Their diets shifted with the seasons: deer in autumn, carrion, or smaller mammals. But in the hard months of winter, when deep cold set in and prey vanished beneath ice or snow, instinct sometimes blurred into desperation. Locals warned of animals following sled trails at dusk. Nikolai heard the same warnings that morning, but didn't take them seriously. He'd checked his flare gun, but left his rifle behind, citing its weight. By noon, the weather had shifted fast, gusting snow and dropping visibility. His supervisor made several radio attempts that went unanswered, assuming battery failure from the cold. When evening came and Nikolai still hadn't returned, Yevgen, a neighbouring ranger and longtime friend, prepared to follow his route before dark. Yevgen rode out around 5 p.m. with a flashlight mounted on his snowmobile and a sidearm holstered under his coat. The tracks were faint but visible, a single snowmobile line winding north, then stopping abruptly about 800 meters from the ridge. There, the engine was half buried in snow, its headlights still faintly glowing. Prints showed that Nikolai had dismounted, perhaps to clear ice from the track. Around the site, another pattern emerged, paw marks deep and overlapping, circling. The snow bore drag lines, evidence of pacing. Then the circle tightened. From that point, the scene unfolded through what Yevgen later described as a sequence of struggle. Human footprints turned erratic, moving backward. Closer inspection revealed a snapped branch at chest height and a torn glove 10 feet away. A smear of blood marked the snowmobile's side panel. 30 feet beyond, the snow showed clear impressions of multiple bodies pressing down, wolves and man. The wolves had likely approached silently, using the cover of snowfall and wind. Initial bites were to the legs, pulling him down. Blood spray against nearby birch bark indicated arterial injury within seconds. As the attack progressed, the evidence suggested coordinated movement. Bite patterns indicated coordinated restraint from multiple angles. His jacket was shredded along the spine, showing where one animal had clamped onto his back, while another tore at the neck. Boot prints ended mid-stride, replaced by drag marks. Yevgen followed them cautiously, revolver drawn. The forest was unnervingly still. He found the body 30 meters downhill near a frozen stream. The snow around it was flattened and red. The wolves had likely fed briefly before retreating. Later investigations showed that the surrounding prints belonged to at least 4 individuals, 2 larger adults, 2 smaller juveniles. Yevgen radioed the base immediately. It took nearly an hour for a snow vehicle from the nearest post to arrive, by which time darkness had swallowed the clearing. The men lifted the body onto a tarp, careful not to disturb the bite patterns for analysis. The stench of blood lingered even in the cold. The pack didn't return, but distant howls echoed as the rescuers secured the area. Nikolai's remains were taken to Dalna for examination. The autopsy confirmed catastrophic blood loss with multiple punctures to major vessels and crushing trauma to the neck vertebrae, consistent with a fatal bite. Time of death was estimated shortly after the onset of the attack. The official report listed predatory behavior exacerbated by winter scarcity. Specialists noted that 2016 saw an unusual decline in prey density across the region. The incident received a single mention on regional news, framed as a tragic encounter during severe weather. There was no footage, only photographs from the recovery team that were never released publicly. Now, let's turn to a completely different scene, a world away. It was June 14th, 2015, and the Sunset Lake subdivision in suburban Tampa, Florida, was settling into another warm summer evening. The gated community, built around a series of interconnected retention ponds and decorative canals, had been marketed as a tropical paradise for retirees seeking the Florida lifestyle. Walter Walt Kowalski, a 67-year-old retired plumber from Ohio, was enjoying his 5th year in the Sunshine State from the comfort of his backyard patio, which overlooked one of the community's scenic waterways. Alligators have remained virtually unchanged for over 200 million years. Think about that for a moment. Perfectly adapted as ambush hunters, they're patient, powerful, and utterly at home in their aquatic world. And sometimes that world intersects with ours in the most tragic ways. I remember reading a story once, a local news item that stuck with me for days. It was about a man named Walt, who moved to Florida after selling his plumbing business. He was drawn there, like so many are, by the promise of year-round golf, fishing, and the outdoor life he couldn't have in Ohio's harsh winters. He bought a modest ranch home with direct water access, complete with a private dock. He loved to fish and feed the ducks that became regular visitors to his backyard. His routine was simple. Sit on his patio with a cold beer, watch the sunset reflect off the calm water, and toss breadcrumbs to the waterfowl. The Sunset Lakes community, where Walt lived, had been built on reclaimed wetlands. Developers created a system of retention ponds and canals to manage stormwater and provide attractive water features. These artificial waterways connected to natural creek systems that flowed into Tampa Bay, creating corridors for wildlife to move between developed and undeveloped areas. Recent heavy rains had raised water levels, bringing even more wildlife activity into residential areas. Walt had noticed more alligators in the community's waters lately, but he, like many Floridians, had learned to coexist with them. His regular duck feeding, though, had created a reliable food source, attracting waterfowl from all over. American alligators, as apex predators, are opportunistic feeders. They'll consume anything they can overpower: birds, fish, mammals, and, occasionally, humans who get too close. One evening, Walt was relaxing on his patio when he noticed his favorite fishing lure had become tangled in the vegetation near his dock. He waded into the knee-deep water, using a long-handled net to try to free the snagged lure. He'd done this many times over the past 5 years without incident, confident that the shallow water near his property was safe. The attack came from directly beneath him. A 12-foot male alligator, submerged motionless near the dock for over an hour, waiting for ducks, exploded upward. Its jaws clamped down on Walt's right leg with bone-crushing power. The 3,000 pounds of bite press instantly fractured his femur and severed major arteries. The alligator then initiated its signature death roll, spinning rapidly in the water while maintaining its grip. The violent rotation dislocated Walt's hip and pulled him fully into the canal. The alligator dragged Walt toward the deeper center of the canal. Within minutes, Walt's movements ceased, as drowning and massive blood loss overwhelmed him. Emergency responders arrived within 10 minutes of the call, but the alligator had already retreated to the deeper water with Walt's body. police and wildlife officers worked through the night to locate and capture the reptile. The investigation revealed that Walt's regular duck feeding had inadvertently attracted the large alligator to his property, creating a dangerous situation that culminated in the fatal attack. Walt's death prompted immediate changes to the Sunset Lakes community's water safety protocols, including the installation of warning signs around all retention ponds and canals. It was September 8, 2014. The vast wetlands of the Florida Everglades stretched endlessly under the blazing afternoon sun. Sawgrass prairies and cypress swamps teeming with wildlife. Michael Chen, a 35-year-old software engineer from Seattle, was on his first visit to Florida. He was on a cross-country road trip to celebrate his recent promotion. Michael had always been fascinated by technology and outdoor adventure, spending his weekends hiking in the Pacific Northwest mountains. His engineering background gave him confidence in analyzing risks and solving problems. But his experience with dangerous wildlife was limited to black bears and mountain lions, animals that could be avoided through proper precautions. Michael had grown up in urban Seattle, developing his love of nature through weekend camping trips. His methodical approach to problem-solving had made him successful in his career, but it had also given him perhaps too much confidence in his ability to assess and manage dangerous situations. Michael enjoyed taking photos of his travels to share with his family and friends back home. That afternoon, he joined a small group airboat tour that promised close encounters with alligators and other Everglades wildlife. The tour guide, a weathered Floridian with decades of swamp experience, had repeatedly warned passengers to remain seated and keep their hands inside the boat at all times. I've always been struck by the power of apex predators, how perfectly adapted they are to their environments. Take alligators, for example. Adult males can reach lengths of 14 feet and weigh over 1,000 pounds. Their jaw muscles can exert over 3,000 pounds of press per square inch. They can even launch themselves partially out of the water with explosive force. They see any movement near their territory as either prey to be consumed or threats to be eliminated. An airboat tour had been progressing smoothly for nearly an hour when the guide spotted a massive alligator sunning itself on a mudbank, only about 20 feet away. This reptile was exceptional, easily 12 feet in length and weighing over 800 pounds. Its prehistoric form was perfectly motionless in the afternoon heat. One of the passengers, a man named Michael, began photographing the magnificent predator. He was excited to capture images of such an impressive wild animal to show his colleagues back home. But his enthusiasm quickly overcame his caution, and he leaned farther over the boat's edge to get closer shots of the massive alligator. The fatal moment came when Michael's phone slipped from his grip and began falling toward the dark water. Without thinking, Michael lunged forward, extending his body over the side of the airboat, desperately trying to catch his expensive device before it disappeared into the swamp. The massive alligator had been monitoring the boat's presence with predatory patience, and Michael's sudden movement triggered its attack response immediately. The 800-pound reptile exploded from the mudbank with terrifying speed, its powerful tail propelling it through the water like a missile aimed directly at Michael's exposed position. The alligator's massive jaws clamped down on Michael's outstretched arm with bone-crushing force. Its 3,000 pounds of bite press instantly shattered bones and severed major arteries. Michael's scream of shock and pain echoed across the swamp as the reptile's momentum pulled him completely over the side of the airboat and into the murky water. The tour guide and other passengers grabbed desperately at Michael's legs, trying to pull him back into the boat, while the massive alligator maintained its crushing grip on his arm. The alligator immediately began its signature death roll, spinning rapidly in the water while maintaining its devastating grip. Michael's struggles grew weaker as the combination of massive blood loss, crushing injuries, and drowning overwhelmed his body. The alligator's grip never loosened as it continued the death roll with mechanical precision, each rotation causing additional trauma while ensuring its prey could not escape. Within minutes, Michael's movement ceased as the alligator's brutal assault proved fatal. The massive reptile dragged his body into deeper water, where it disappeared beneath the surface with its kill. Emergency responders arrived within the hour, but Michael's body was not recovered until the following day, when wildlife officials located the massive alligator and retrieved the remains. The tour company immediately implemented physical barriers around all passenger seating areas and enhanced safety briefings for future tours. Michael's death prompted his family to advocate for stricter safety regulations in the wildlife tourism industry. The incident highlighted the deadly consequences of ignoring safety warnings around apex predators, and became a cautionary tale about the dangers of prioritizing photography over personal safety. It was July 8, 2017, and the Detroit summer heat shimmered off abandoned lots as Maria Santos loaded her car with dog food and water. At 28, she'd spent 5 years walking dogs by day and feeding Detroit's feral population by night. Recently laid off, she'd been spending more time in dangerous neighborhoods, trying to help animals most people considered beyond saving. The economic collapse had hit Detroit hard, leaving entire neighborhoods abandoned and creating perfect breeding grounds for packs of wild dogs. These weren't lost pets. They were second and third generation feral animals that had never known human kindness, surviving by scavenging and defending territory with savage efficiency. Maria's regular route took her through 6 abandoned lots, each home to a different pack. She knew their hierarchies, feeding schedules, and individual personalities. But the newest group concerned her the most. 6 dogs led by a large German Shepherd mix she'd nicknamed Alpha, including several animals she didn't recognize. This pack was hungrier, more aggressive, and less predictable than the others. But Maria's compassion overruled her caution. These animals needed help, and she was the only one willing to provide it. As twilight settled over the abandoned neighborhood, Maria parked near the lot where Alpha's pack had made their home. The area was a wasteland of broken concrete and waist-high weeds, perfect cover for animals that had learned to hunt and hide. Maria had been feeding this pack for 3 weeks, always maintaining a safe distance. But tonight felt different. The dogs seemed more agitated, their movements more coordinated, their attention more focused on her than the food. What she didn't realize was that pack dynamics had shifted with the addition of 3 new dogs, animals that saw humans not as providers, but as competitors. Alpha emerged from the shadows first, his 80-pound frame moving with predatory grace. Behind him came the others, a scarred pit bull mix, 2 smaller dogs, and 3 newcomers whose breeds were impossible to determine. Their eyes reflected the dim streetlight like mirrors. Maria began distributing food as always, tossing handfuls of kibble in different directions to prevent fighting. But tonight, the strategy backfired. Instead of dispersing to eat, the dogs began to see. I've often wondered about the line between domesticity and wildness, how thin it can be, and how easily crossed. I remember reading about Maria, who fed a pack of stray dogs near her home. She saw them as creatures in need, but they saw her differently. When she stepped in to break up a fight between 2 of the smaller dogs, the pack leader, Alpha, attacked. 80 pounds of muscle slammed into her, knocking her down. The other dogs joined in, their pack instincts overwhelming any memory of her kindness. They dragged her deeper into the lot, away from any hope of rescue. Their coordinated attack, it was said, spoke to generations of predatory instincts, honed by urban survival. These weren't pets gone bad. They were wild animals who had learned to see humans as either threats or prey. It reminds me of another story, one that unfolded at the Namba Island Chimpanzee Sanctuary in Uganda. It was September 8, 2015. The sanctuary was a refuge for orphaned and rescued chimpanzees, a 100-acre forested island on Lake Victoria. Kendra Sullivan, a wildlife photographer, arrived to document the rehabilitation work there. She had a reputation for fearlessness, built on capturing intimate portraits of domestic and farm animals. Her experience with horses, cattle, even aggressive bulls led her to believe she understood animal behavior, that she could apply her understanding of domestic animals to wild ones. The sanctuary director, Dr. James Mukasa, and a caretaker named Peter Sally tried to warn her. The 49 rescued chimpanzees, many traumatized by poaching or the illegal pet trade, retained all the instincts and physical capabilities of their wild counterparts. Chimpanzees are incredibly powerful, 5 times stronger than an adult human, with a grip strength that can crush bones. Kendra, frustrated with the viewing restrictions, slipped away from her group and entered a restricted maintenance area. It brought her within reach of Boso, the sanctuary's dominant male. He was a 150-pound chimpanzee who'd been rescued as an infant. Boso had shown aggressive tendencies and was considered one of the most dangerous animals in the facility. When Kendra raised her camera to photograph him, Boso interpreted it as a challenge. His response was immediate. He lunged forward and grabbed her arm with crushing force. I've spent years tracking animal behavior, learning to move silently, and reading patterns in the snow. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened that day near Waskew Lake. It was February 9th, 2014, a morning that began like any other routine trip into the woods, but quickly turned into something unimaginable. My cousin Jeff and I had set out to retrieve SD cards from trail cams, something we'd done countless times before. We were deep in the northern boreal forest of Saskatchewan. David Lasky, that's me, part-time wildlife photographer. My cousin Jeff often joined me on winter runs. We'd grown up hunting and fishing together, though we didn't carry a firearm anymore. The plan was simple: a 2-hour snowmobile ride, a short hike to the cameras, and back before dusk. Wolves in that region were generally grey, thick-coated animals, maybe 90 pounds, moving in packs of 4 to 8. I always believed they avoided humans. We were dressed warmly and carried a single red flare for safety. By 9:30 a.m., we'd parked the snowmobile and started walking the last half mile, our breath hanging in the still air. We reached the first camera, swapped the SD card. Everything seemed normal. Then, around 10:15, as we crossed the creek, Jeff slipped on a patch of ice. As I crouched to help him up, we saw them. Movement in the tree line. They just stood there, their eyes reflecting the light. Jeff waved his arms, shouting, trying to scare them off. But they didn't run. I didn't know it then, but a deer carcass lay hidden in the snow nearby. The pack was defending its food. They began to fan out, forming a semicircle. I told Jeff they were just curious. That noise would drive them away. But even as I said it, one of the wolves lowered its head and started advancing. We started backing up the slope toward our snowmobile, moving quickly, but without turning. The wolves followed, quiet and steady. Then the first lunge. A grey blur across the ice, jaws clamping onto the back of my leg. The impact sent me face first into the snow. Jeff spun around, fumbling with the flare. Two more wolves broke from the trees. I tried to kick free, leaving streaks of blood in the snow. I rolled onto my back and swung my camera bag, hitting one wolf across the muzzle, but another struck from the side, teeth finding my shoulder. Jeff finally got the flare lit, the red flame hissing. He swung it toward the animals. One snarled and darted back, fur singed. But the others held their ground. I was on my knees, one hand pressed to my thigh, blood pumping dark and fast through my fingers. I tried to stand, but my leg gave out. Jeff charged forward with the flare, yelling, waving it more aggressively. The heat drove them back for a moment, circling just out of reach. I slumped sideways, the cold seeping into my bones. I sometimes find myself dwelling on the stories that end in tragedy, the ones that leave you with a hollow feeling. The report listed the cause of death as exsanguination, a terrible loss of blood stemming from trauma to the femoral artery. The wounds were consistent with bites from a large animal. The pack of wolves responsible was eventually trapped and relocated. But even with the official report, even with the relocation, I wonder if the distinction between defending a food cache and actively hunting really mattered to those who were left behind. Then, just a few years later, on December 9, 2018, a hillside community in suburban Los Angeles was enjoying an unusually warm winter evening. Juvenile males, like the one that was about to cross Kevin's path, are particularly dangerous. They're establishing new territories and often display more aggressive behavior than adults. They're less skilled at hunting natural prey and may target easier victims, domestic animals, and, occasionally, humans. Mountain lions are capable of incredible stealth. They can stalk prey for extended periods before launching surprise attacks from close range. As Kevin jogged through the overgrown vacant lot, he was unaware that an 80-pound juvenile male mountain lion had been using the area as a hunting ground, preying on domestic cats and small dogs. This young cat had been displaced from his own territory and was desperately seeking new hunting grounds. He'd been stalking Kevin for several hundred yards, moving silently through the dense brush. Kevin's size, his movement, the fact that he was alone, all of it triggered the cat's hunting instincts. The attack came from behind as Kevin moved through a particularly dense section of chaparral. The mountain lion launched himself from the brush with explosive force, landing squarely on Kevin's back. The impact drove Kevin face first into the rocky ground, and the cat's claws dug into his shoulders and back. The mountain lion's jaws clamped down on the back of Kevin's neck, his teeth puncturing through muscle and vertebrae. Kevin tried to fight back, but his backpack was no match for the cat's strength. Kevin's death prompted the city to fence off all vacant lots in hillside communities and develop new wildlife management protocols for areas where urban development meets natural habitat. The Canyon Vista community implemented comprehensive safety measures, including motion sensor lighting along all informal trails, emergency communication systems, and mandatory wildlife awareness training for all residents. Kevin's family established a memorial foundation to support wildlife safety education and habitat preservation programs that reduce human-wildlife conflicts. Then there's the story of Brandon Walsh, a 27-year-old personal trainer from Houston. It was November 3, 2015. And the sprawling grounds of Lone Air Exotic Ranch stretched across 300 acres of East Texas countryside, where wealthy clients paid premium prices for once-in-a-lifetime photo sessions with dangerous predators. The private facility operated in the shadows of legitimate wildlife conservation, offering interactions that accredited zoos would never permit. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across custom-built enclosures, housing tigers, lions, and other big cats acquired through questionable channels. Brandon had discovered the ranch through word-of-mouth recommendations from clients who had visited similar facilities. He was passionate about fitness and adventure, always seeking new challenges that would test his physical and mental limits. He had saved money for months to afford this unique experience, viewing it as the ultimate test of his courage and confidence around dangerous animals. Brandon had built his personal training business through dedication and hard work, developing a reputation for helping clients overcome their fears and achieve seemingly impossible fitness goals. His confident personality and fearless approach to challenges had made him popular among Houston's fitness community, though his success had perhaps made him overconfident about his ability to handle any dangerous situation. That afternoon, Brandon had paid the rancher's exorbitant fee for a private photo session with Sasha, a 300 lb female Bengal tiger who had been hand-raised from a cub. The ranch owner, a former circus trainer with decades of experience handling big cats, had agreed to supervise the session while repeatedly emphasizing the extreme dangers involved. Bengal tigers are among the world's most powerful predators, with adult females weighing up to 350 libs and possessing incredible strength, speed, and hunting instincts that remain sharp regardless of human contact. These magnificent cats are solitary, territorial animals that can become extremely aggressive when their personal space is violated. Their powerful jaws can deliver bite forces exceeding 1,000 lbs per square inch, while their razor-sharp claws can grow up to 4 inches long. The photo session began with Brandon positioned outside Sasha's enclosure, capturing dramatic shots of himself posed near the massive predator while maintaining the safety barrier between them. However, Brandon quickly became frustrated with the distance, believing he needed closer contact to create the dramatic photos he had envisioned. Brandon convinced the ranch owner to allow him closer access to Sasha, arguing that his physical conditioning and a confident energy would keep the tiger calm during the shoot. Against his better judgment and all established safety protocols, the owner agreed to let Brandon enter a smaller holding area adjacent to Sasha's main enclosure. The holding area was separated from Sasha's territory by only a chain link barrier, bringing Brandon within arm's reach of the massive predator. Brandon began posing for his camera, which was mounted on a tripod and set to take photos automatically. Brandon's fatal mistake was crouching down next to the barrier and extending his hand towards Sasha, believing that his confident demeanor would demonstrate his dominance over the apex predator. The tiger's ears flattened slightly against her massive head, and her tail began twitching with increasing frequency. Sasha's attack was swift and devastating. The moment Brandon moved suddenly to adjust his pose for another photo, the tiger's hunting instincts activated with explosive force. Sasha launched herself at the barrier with tremendous power, her massive paws striking the chain-link fencing while her razor-sharp claws found purchase on Brandon's extended arm. The tiger's incredible strength pulled Brandon against the barrier, while her powerful jaws snapped at his position through the fencing. The tiger's claws raked across Brandon's arm and shoulder, opening deep gashes that immediately began bleeding profusely, while her crushing grip prevented any possibility of retreat. The ranch owner rushed to intervene, using emergency protocols to distract Sasha and force her to release her grip on Brandon. However, the tiger's claws had already caused catastrophic damage to Brandon's arm and shoulder, severing major arteries and causing massive blood loss that quickly overwhelmed his system. Brandon collapsed from shock and blood loss within minutes of the attack, his physical conditioning proving useless against injuries that no human could withstand. I've seen the photos from these kinds of incidents. They haunt me. In 2013, a bodybuilder named Brandon succumbed to massive trauma and blood loss after being attacked by a captive tiger during a photo shoot. It's a stark reminder that wild animals are not props, no matter how alluring the image might be. Now, as I look over these notes, another story unfolds. A grim tale from August 19th, 2013, in the Missouri heat. It involves a man named Tommy Rodriguez and his illegal breeding operation. At 45, Tommy had been running puppy mills for over a decade, but financial press forced him to cut corners, and those corners would ultimately cost him everything. His 20-acre property was a maze of makeshift kennels in converted sheds, housing nearly 80 dogs in various stages of breeding and neglect. He specialized in popular breeds, fetching high prices from unsuspecting buyers who never saw the appalling conditions. But the real money, chillingly, came from the security side of his operation. 4 massive dogs patrolling the perimeter. 2 cane corsos weighing over 120 pounds each, and 2 mastiff mixes tipping the scales at nearly 140 pounds. These weren't pets. They were weapons, acquired from a defunct fighting operation and trained to be aggressive. The financial press that led to Tommy's demise had been building for months. Veterinary bills, feed costs, and facility maintenance had eaten into his profits. Increased scrutiny from animal welfare organizations forced him to operate more carefully. But instead of improving conditions, he cut back on everything: food, medical care, even basic maintenance. The guard dogs, once fed premium meat to maintain their strength, were reduced to scraps and cheap kibble. Tommy didn't seem to grasp that hungry guard dogs are exponentially more dangerous than well-fed ones. Hunger sharpened their predatory instincts, made them more territorial, and reduced their tolerance for human presence. The 4 animals that had once been content to patrol were now viewing everything on the property, including Tommy himself, as potential competition for scarce resources. The dogs had been showing signs of increased aggression for weeks. They'd begun fighting among themselves over food, marking territory more aggressively, and showing less deference to Tommy's commands. A smart operator would have recognized these warning signs, but Tommy was desperate, distracted, and dangerously overconfident. On that sweltering August night, Tommy made his final rounds of the property, checking on breeding females and security systems. It was past midnight, and the Missouri countryside was silent except for distant barking and the hum of inadequate ventilation fans. He carried a flashlight and a metal rod for moving aggressive animals, but his attention was focused on financial calculations rather than the danger lurking in the shadows. The guard dogs had been without food for 3 days, not by design, but because Tommy had been too busy dealing with a sick litter to maintain their feeding schedule. Their hunger had reached a critical point, where survival instincts overrode years of conditioning. They were no longer guard dogs protecting property. They were predators looking for their next meal. Tommy's fatal mistake was approaching the area where he kept the guard dogs without proper precautions. Normally, he would have fed them first, ensuring their compliance before entering their territory. But financial stress and exhaustion had made him careless, and he walked directly into their domain, carrying nothing but a flashlight and false confidence. The attack began when Brutus, the larger cane corso, emerged from the shadows near the feeding area. His 125-pound frame moved with surprising silence, his massive head lowered in a hunting posture that Tommy should have recognized as a threat. Behind him came the others: Titan, the second cane corso; Rex, a 140-pound mastiff mix; and Scar, whose scarred muzzle told the story of his fighting background. Tommy realized the danger too late. As he turned to retreat, Brutus launched himself forward, his powerful jaws clamping down on Tommy's left eye with crushing force. The impact drove Tommy to the ground, his flashlight spinning away into the darkness as he screamed for help that would never come. The other 3 dogs joined the attack within seconds, their pack instincts fully engaged. Rex grabbed Tommy's right arm, his massive jaws crushing bone as he shook violently. Titan went for the torso, his teeth tearing through clothing and flesh with mechanical efficiency. Scar circled the attack, darting in to bite and retreat, his fighting experience evident in his tactical approach. Tommy's screams echoed across the empty countryside, but his nearest neighbor was over 2 miles away. The dogs worked with the coordination of experienced predators. Their attacks focused on disabling their prey rather than killing quickly. They had learned patience in their previous lives, and hunger had made them methodical in their violence. The assault continued for nearly 20 minutes, with the dogs taking turns feeding on Tommy while he was still alive. His struggles grew weaker as blood loss and shock took their toll, but the animals showed no mercy. They had been conditioned to view violence as normal, hunger as constant, and humans as either threats or food sources. I've often thought about the strange justice of the natural world. Tommy, who ran one of Missouri's largest illegal puppy mills, met a gruesome end. His body, broken and partially consumed, was found near the feeding area, surrounded by the very animals he exploited. The guard dogs, driven by hunger, had turned on him. For 3 weeks, his remains went undiscovered, the dogs continuing to feed. The other dogs, trapped and starving, perished in their kennels. The stench of death eventually led authorities to the scene, where they found unimaginable horror. The surviving guard dogs were shot, and the full extent of Tommy's cruelty was revealed. Dozens of breeding females kept in deplorable conditions, puppies dying from disease, and financial records showing sick animals sold across state lines. The surviving dogs, too far gone, were euthanized. Tommy's death ended his puppy mill, but the cost was immense. The animals he'd exploited becoming his executioners, their desperation turning them into monsters. Then, on August 22, 2014, in the exclusive Cypress Point community, on the edge of the Florida Everglades, Roberto Mendez, a 35-year-old landscaper, was working alone. The gated development, built on reclaimed wetlands with artificial lakes, represented luxury living in South Florida. Roberto had built his landscaping company from nothing, serving some of the area's wealthiest communities. He took pride in his work, supporting his wife and 2 young children, often working long hours in the Florida heat. Cypress Point was constructed on former Everglades wetlands, developers creating decorative ponds connected to natural waterways. These artificial lakes were stocked with ornamental fish and surrounded by tropical landscaping. Recent heavy rains had raised water levels, allowing wildlife to move freely between natural and artificial water systems. Roberto was familiar with Florida's wildlife, respecting alligators, snakes, and other dangerous animals, checking water features carefully before working near them. On this particular afternoon, he was trimming bushes around a small ornamental pond when his hedge trimmer slipped into the shallow water. American alligators are perfectly camouflaged ambush predators, remaining motionless for hours. Adult females can be early 8 to 10 feet and weigh up to 200 pounds, possessing incredible speed and power. They are most dangerous when protecting nesting sites or when surprised. Their bite force exceeds 2,000 pounds per square inch, and their death roll technique is designed to disorient and drown prey. Roberto waded into the knee-deep pond to retrieve his trimmer, assuming the manicured water feature was safe. The pond appeared peaceful, with no signs of wildlife activity. He'd worked around similar water features hundreds of times without incident. The attack came the moment his feet touched the muddy bottom. A 10-foot female alligator, hidden among the vegetation, exploded into action, her jaws clamping down on Roberto's right leg with devastating force. The bite instantly fractured his tibia and fibula, her teeth puncturing arteries and muscle tissue. The alligator immediately initiated her signature death roll, spinning rapidly in the water, maintaining her crushing grip. The violent rotation pulled Roberto into the deeper center of the pond, where the gator's aquatic advantages became overwhelming. His desperate attempts to break free only triggered the alligator's instincts to bite harder and roll more aggressively. Roberto's screams for help echoed across the manicured grounds as the alligator continued her relentless death roll. The spinning motion dislocated his knee and hip, causing massive internal bleeding and tissue damage. The ornamental pond's clear water turned red as Roberto's struggles grew weaker with each rotation. A homeowner working in his garden heard Roberto's cries and rushed to investigate. I've always been drawn to the intersection of nature and human arrogance, where the wild reminds us of our place. March 22nd, 2017. A date that sticks with me. Unfolded at the Neptune Islands off the coast of South Australia. It's a place I've always wanted to visit, even though I'm terrified of sharks. These remote, rocky outcrops rise from the ocean, surrounded by crystal clear waters that plunge to depths of over 200 feet. These waters are a highway for migrating great whites, drawn by the abundant seal colonies. On that day, Tara Whitfield, a 38-year-old marine biology graduate student from Los Angeles, arrived, and from the start, things felt wrong. She had booked the most expensive shark cage diving package and almost immediately began making demands that seemed to push against the very nature of the place. She was known for her sense of entitlement, seemingly convinced that money could buy her anything. She berated Captain Steve Morrison and marine biologist Dr. Lisa Chen multiple times during the morning briefing. Her boyfriend, Brad Mitchell, watched uncomfortably as she apparently screamed at the crew about what she called their pathetic safety restrictions. I can only imagine the tension on that boat. This enormous shark displayed classic hunting behaviors, circling the boat with calculated precision, investigating the steel diving cage. It was then that Tara secretly loosened the connections on her diving regulator, planning to create a fake equipment malfunction to justify exiting the cage. She believed she was clever enough to manipulate the situation to get the unrestricted shark access she felt entitled to. Once submerged, Tara immediately began signaling fake distress, pointing frantically at her sabotaged regulator. Captain Morrison initiated emergency procedures to bring her to the surface. But instead of ascending, Tara swam away from the cage toward the feeding sharks, believing her superior intelligence made her invulnerable. Her erratic swimming created the exact type of distressed prey behavior that triggers great white hunting instincts. The massive female great white detected Tara's panicked swimming and abandoned the chum bait to investigate this new potential prey. The enormous predator approached from below at speeds exceeding 25 miles per hour. The shark's assault was swift and devastating. Rising from the depths like a living torpedo, the great white struck Tara from below with tremendous force, its massive jaws opening to reveal rows of gleaming, serrated teeth. The impact drove Tara upward as the shark's jaws clamped down around her torso with bone-crushing press. The razor-sharp teeth sliced through her wetsuit and deep into her chest and abdomen. The crushing bite force of 4,000 pounds per square inch shattered Tara's rib cage instantly, puncturing both lungs and severing major blood vessels throughout her torso. The shark's powerful jaw muscles continued applying press while its head thrashed violently from side to side, the signature feeding behavior that allows great whites to tear away large chunks of flesh. The violent shaking motion severed Tara's body at the waist, separating her upper and lower torso. There are moments when our assumptions about the natural world crumble with terrifying speed. I've read accounts that haunt me still, stories where a sense of control gives way to brutal reality. Take the case of Tara, who believed her money and demands could somehow override the instincts of a shark. Her story ended in seconds. A catastrophic loss of blood and destruction of vital organs, all because she thought she could bend nature to her will. The investigation afterwards revealed she deliberately sabotaged equipment, ignored safety protocols. It led to stricter rules for shark cage diving. Her family, ironically, continued the same pattern of entitlement, filing lawsuits after her death. Then there's Harold Thompson, a 71-year-old dog breeder in Alabama. It was a hot day, March 22nd, 2015. I picture the sun beating down on his property, the barking echoing from kennels spread across those 5 acres. Hank, as everyone called him, moved slowly but confidently. "20 years he'd been doing this, breeding Rottweilers and German Shepherds. It started as a hobby, grew into a modest business. 8 breeding females, 3 males, selling litters all over the southeast. But age, it seems, made Hank careless. Younger, he'd never enter a kennel alone, especially with breeding males in their territorial phases. He knew what those dogs could do, the power in their jaws, the speed of their attacks. But experience had bred overconfidence. The centerpiece of their operation was Brutus, a 130-pound Rottweiler. His massive frame made him their most sought-after stud. 4 years old, prime of his life, bloodline tracing back to German working dogs. His offspring commanded premium prices for protection. Recently, though, Brutus had been showing increased aggression. A minor injury to his left rear leg had left him limping, irritable. He'd even snapped at Martha when she tried to examine the wound. The vet prescribed pain medication, but the dog's temperament only grew more unpredictable. Martha had voiced her concerns about Hank working alone with Brutus, especially with the dog's recent mood swings. But Hank dismissed her worries with stubborn confidence. He'd raised Brutus from a puppy. Their bond, he believed, was unbreakable. That March afternoon, Martha drove into town for supplies, leaving Hank alone with the dogs, Kennels needed cleaning, water bowls filling. Work he'd done thousands of times before. Brutus watched from his kennel as Hank approached. I can almost see the dog's dark eyes, tracking every movement with an intensity that should have served as a warning. He was panting heavily, despite the shade, his injured leg causing him to shift uncomfortably. Pain has a way of making even docile animals unpredictable, and Brutus was far from docile. Hank unlocked the kennel gate, stepped inside, bucket in hand. His attention was focused on the dirty water bowl in the corner. He'd performed this routine hundreds of times. But today, Brutus was different. His ears were pinned back, tail held low, massive body coiled with tension. As Hank bent down to clean the water bowl, his back turned to the dog. Brutus made his decision. No growling, no warning. Just 130 pounds of muscle launching through the air with devastating force. The impact drove Hank face first into the concrete floor, his bucket clattering away. Brutus's jaws found their target, sinking deep into Hank's throat, crushing his windpipe, severing major blood vessels in a single catastrophic bite. Hank's hands clawed desperately at the animal's massive head, but Brutus had locked on with predatory determination. The dog's powerful neck muscles allowed him to shake violently, tearing through tissue and bone with mechanical efficiency. Hank's screams were cut short by the damage to his throat, replaced by a wet, gurgling sound that grew weaker by the second. They began to circle again, emboldened by the fading chemical scent. One flank of the group approached from behind, following her retreat up a shallow embankment. Handprints pressed deep into the soil showed she climbed in haste. Blood marks began at the top of the slope. One wolf likely lunged first, grabbing her backpack or arm. The straps were torn clean through, consistent with a pulling force rather than a cut. A second wolf joined, aiming lower, its bite breaking the skin along her thigh. She tried to fight back. The spray canister lay spent beside her pack, but the group coordinated, one attacking from the rear, the others darting forward. The ground at the site was churned with soil and hair, suggesting several minutes of movement before she was forced down. Analysis of tissue marks later revealed crushing bites to the neck and shoulder, consistent with a killing grip, the kind wolves used to suffocate large prey. Her jacket was shredded, and the torn sleeve recovered 20 feet away still held fragments of skin and fabric. Search efforts began that night with ground crews, and a helicopter dispatched after rangers noted her vehicle unmoved. The aircraft spotted a disturbed patch of gravel near the Tlat Channel the next morning. Sarah's body lay partially covered by soil and debris, her left arm missing, likely carried off by scavengers after the attack. Her reputation for getting her way through sheer force of will had created a dangerous sense of entitlement. Tommy Rodriguez, a 52-year-old tour guide with over 20 years of experience, immediately recognized Monica as a problematic client during the morning safety briefing. She had interrupted his presentation. I've seen the aftermath of these encounters too many times. The arrogance of thinking we're somehow above the natural world. It always ends the same way. I remember reading about Monica, who visited a park during peak alligator breeding season. Despite warnings, she dismissed safety protocols and ventured into a restricted lagoon, convinced her legal background and taxpayer status made her immune to danger. Tommy, her guide, had repeatedly warned her about the territorial males guarding their nesting sites. Park Ranger Sarah Kim even tried to explain the dangers of alligator nesting season, but Monica brushed it off as government overreach. It's a familiar story, sadly. American alligators, especially the males, are formidable apex predators. They can reach lengths of up to 14 feet and weigh over 1,000 pounds, possessing a bite force exceeding 3,000 pounds per square inch. They're ancient reptiles, capable of remaining motionless for hours before exploding into action. Tommy stressed the importance of staying within designated channels, but Monica grew belligerent, accusing him of limiting her rights. She broke away from the tour, paddling her kayak towards a lagoon clearly marked with warning signs. This lagoon was a primary nesting area for a massive 12-foot bull alligator. The presence of her kayak triggered the alligator's most aggressive instincts. The reptile, resting beneath the surface, detected her paddle strokes almost instantly. The attack was swift. The alligator launched itself from the water, its jaws clamping down on the front of Monica's kayak, capsizing it and throwing her into the murky water. Disoriented, she struggled as the alligator identified her as a threat. Its jaws found purchase on her torso, razor-sharp teeth puncturing her life jacket, chest, and abdomen. The crushing bite shattered ribs and severed major blood vessels. Then came the death roll, a violent spinning motion designed to disorient prey and cause massive internal trauma. The alligator rotated rapidly, spinning Monica's body while maintaining its grip. This violent rotation tore muscles and caused catastrophic injuries. The death roll continued for over a minute, filling her punctured lungs with water, the crushing press preventing her from breathing. The combination of trauma, drowning, and blood loss proved fatal within minutes. Tommy radioed for help, but it was too late. On a seemingly idyllic day, May 14th, 2017, in Great Smoky Mountains National Park, another drama was unfolding. Sarah Johnson, a 29-year-old nurse from Atlanta, was hiking with her fiancé, Tom. Black bears are the most common bear species in North America, but it's the mother bears with cubs that truly command respect and, sadly, can pose the greatest danger. I've read accounts of their behavior, and it's clear that they become exponentially more aggressive and territorial than solitary bears. A female bear will attack without warning, seeing any human presence near her cubs as a mortal threat to be eliminated immediately. They possess incredible strength and speed, capable of running up to 30 mph through the dense forest. It's a force of nature driven by pure instinct. I remember reading about Sarah, who was on an engagement trip and found herself in a situation many dream of, photographing bear cubs. But what began as an opportunity to create incredible memories turned into tragedy. She started photographing the cubs from what she thought was a safe distance, but her excitement at capturing such rare footage led her to gradually move closer, trying to get better shots. Tom, her fiancé, repeatedly urged her to maintain a safe distance and leave the area, but Sarah was convinced that the mother bear wasn't nearby. The cubs continued their playful behavior, wrestling and tumbling through the meadow grass, while Sarah documented their every move. Her photography session continued for nearly 10 minutes, and she captured dozens of images. But Sarah made a fatal mistake. She positioned herself between the cubs and their natural escape route to the forest edge. As she moved to get a better angle for her shots, she unknowingly blocked the path the cubs would take to reach safety if threatened. This triggered the protective instincts of their mother, who had been watching from the tree line. The mother bear's charge from the forest was swift and terrifying. The 200-pound female covered the distance to Sarah's position in seconds. Her powerful legs propelled her massive frame with surprising speed. Her territorial fury focused entirely on eliminating the perceived threat to her cubs. Sarah attempted to retreat when she saw the charging bear, but her foot caught on a fallen log, and she tumbled backward, still clutching her camera. The mother bear reached Sarah's position before she could regain her footing, striking her with bone-crushing force. The bear's massive paw connected with Sarah's back, her razor-sharp claws raking across Sarah's spine and shoulders, while the impact shattered several ribs. Sarah's camera flew from her grip as the bear's enormous weight pinned her to the ground. Her attempts to call for help were silenced by the crushing prees on her chest. The mother bear's powerful jaws clamped down on Sarah's neck, her crushing bite force fracturing vertebrae and severing vital arteries. The bear's protective instincts drove her to continue the assault until she was certain the threat to her cubs had been completely eliminated. Within minutes, Sarah's movement ceased, as the mother bear's brutal assault proved fatal. The protective mother remained near Sarah's body for several more minutes, ensuring the threat was neutralized before gathering her cubs and disappearing into the dense forest. Park rangers arrived over an hour later in response to Tom's emergency call. But Sarah was already dead from massive trauma. The bear family was tracked but left undisturbed, as wildlife officials determined the mother had been acting within normal protective behavioral patterns when defending her young. Sarah's death devastated the hiking community and prompted enhanced educational programs about wildlife safety and proper distance protocols. Her family established a foundation promoting wilderness safety education, ensuring her passion for conservation would continue through enhanced protection for both wildlife and outdoor enthusiasts.